Welcome, everybody, to the Sleeper Wire Show. My name is Rob, and I'll be your host this week, stepping out from behind the curtain for a rare appearance. And with me, I have Mr. Max. What's going on, Max? How you doing this week, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic. Just finishing up some last-minute drafts. Super excited.
With us, we also have Eric Moody, writer for The Athletic. How are you doing today, Eric?
No, I'm doing great. I'm really excited about the start of the regular season. So it's been many months, of NFL offseason activities and free agency draft. So now we're finally here. Thursday night, we'll get it going.
So, speaking of which, who do you have for Thursday night's game?
Oh, for Thursday night's game. Ooh. Yeah, I was thinking about that. Earlier. I actually like the Bears.
I think that's a good choice, seeing as how vaunting that defense is, and Khalil Mack actually came out and said that the reason he loves this rivalry is because he likes to sack Aaron Rodgers. So I think he's going to have a little extra motivation. Max, who do you think it's going to be?
I actually also agree with the Bears. I think the defense is great, but I think their offense is actually pretty underrated. They have some great weapons in the receiving corps. I think Trubisky's going to have a big year. And their run game obviously looks fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. David Montgomery is sexy this year, and his ADP creeped up quickly in this draft season. I was very happy to grab him in a couple money leagues, and I just took him tonight in the 4th round and felt very good about it. So hopefully that pays off, and I'll definitely be talking about the Bears a little bit when we get into some of these sleepers, but how about a little bit of news? So one piece of major news is there is a major storm rocking Florida and just got past the Bahamas. So thoughts and prayers are definitely out there to all the folks that are affected, and please stay safe. Storms are no joke. But is there any kind of news that's caught your eye, Max, in the last couple of days before we get into the sleepers?
All right. Well, first of all, rumors that Zeke's going to sign that contract. I'm pretty excited about that because I've drafted Zeke in a lot of leagues, and I really need him to sign the contract, and he deserves to get paid. He is arguably the best running back in the NFL. But the one sneaky piece of news that no one really talks about is the Kenny Stills going to Houston. I think Kenny Stills, like that little addition, when Will Fuller gets hurt again, Kenny Stills is going to be a really nice wide receiver 3 to have. The ball's going to have to go somewhere, and I think Houston's gearing up for a major offensive season.
Well, I can definitely agree with you there. And since Will Fuller and Kiki QT make up one man for one season, I think you're right that Kenny Stills could see some wide receiver 3 looks out there and probably do a little better than Demaryius Thomas did last year in that little cameo appearance when he stopped by for a cup of coffee and a cake of cookies. Ooh, plate of cookies. But that's not really I don't know if I trust Kenny Stills just coming in early. I would probably be watching him to see if he's building chemistry and if he's on the waiver wire, trying to pick him up before he goes off. If he looks like he's starting to show some promise, maybe pick him up off the waiver. Do you see him getting drafted in drafts you did?
I drafted him twice, but my picks were the last 2 rounds. I got him in the last round in one league, second to last round in another league as a flyer because, like I said, if and when Fuller goes down, I think Kenny Stills actually has the skill set to step in and be a very valuable receiver there.
He's definitely a big play kind of guy. He was the speedy receiver there in Miami, and I'm glad that he's not going to be dealing with the quarterback uncertainty and the fact that they don't have an offensive line. Which brings me to my next point. Eric, do you have any faith in the Dolphins backfield now that Laramie Tunsil is also a Texan?
Yeah, and that's a really difficult situation. They continue to, eject assets, from that organization. So it's going to be a rough year. I'm not very confident, in that backfield, with the personnel that they have. I really feel bad for Josh Rosen. He goes from college to the NFL, terrible situation in Arizona with the Cardinals. Things appear to be looking up, going to Miami, but now it's shaping up to be another dumpster fire as well. So not the ideal situation, and guys that I'm not prioritizing in drafts for this year.
Do you think Kenny Stills is a nice sleeper? Maybe a flyer pick late in drafts?
I was more optimistic about Stills when he was with Miami, because of the target share, that he was going to see, just given his competition at wide receiver. But with the target share that DeAndre Hopkins commands, and also, Will Fuller, I'm just not as optimistic about Stills in that scenario. I know some people could think, okay, well, hey, Fuller, hasn't played, a full season. But I do believe this will be the year where he puts everything together, plays 16 games, has a really good rapport with Deshaun Watson. He kind of takes his fantasy production to the next level. So I'm a little bit lower on Stills now, post-trade.
I think I'd still take him as a flyer late, but I definitely do agree that he probably had a better opportunity out there in Miami. So, Max, what do you think about Austin Eckler now that Melvin Gordon has made the claim, no pay, no play?
I like him. I don't know if he's going to be their full-time starter. I think Justin Jackson's going to take over for them, to be honest. He's talented. I would take a flyer on him, probably a 7th, 8th round pick. I could see RB2 upside if all goes well. That being said, I think you're going to be looking at a Duke Johnson. A Duke Johnson on the Browns with Crowell, where he's going to be useful in PPR, but he's not going to be the end zone guy. That's where I'm at.
Eric, what do you think?
When I look at that backfield, you got Eckler and you've got Justin Jackson. I just prefer Justin Jackson, for a couple of reasons. For one, when you look at Eckler's ADP, I know it's kind of crept into the 5th or 6th round, if you're in a 12-team PPR formats. But Justin Jackson is readily available, very, very late in drafts. I know he didn't have a ton of opportunity last year, but he was very effective when you look at a lot of the different advanced, metrics that are out there. And so I'd rather take him later, for the upside that he brings. And I think he's better suited to even be a potential workhorse, for the Chargers if Gordon truly does pull his best Le'Veon Bell impersonation.
Yeah, I'm going to be really surprised if Melvin Gordon plays football this year. I think at this point, he's made the mountain too big to come off of without suffering some serious backlash and having to suck up that pride. I don't see Melvin Gordon doing that when he really thinks that he stands behind his principle. He believes in what he's doing. So I don't think he's just going to magically come down off of that around week 8, week 9. Maybe if the Chargers aren't doing well, something happens, but I don't think there's anything contractually they can do past this point.
Yeah, I would agree. It's just, but like you said, he's not going to come off of that hill. He's clearly planting his flag, and he was very vocal, on social media last year when Le'Veon Bell, did his holdout. But I think his expectations on what he's worth is obviously not aligned with the Chargers. So, like you said, I don't think he's coming back.
Now, I have a question. The Chargers are now openly looking to trade him. I think he should get paid. I think running backs and O-linemen should be paid. They take the most abuse of anyone. That being said, where do you think, if he was to get traded in the next 2-3 weeks, where do you think he could land? Because that, for the Melvin Gordon owners, the guys who auto-drafted, who fell asleep at the wheel, who grabbed him in the 3rd round or 4th round, because it is Melvin Gordon, you got to take that risk. I mean, if he potentially gets traded to Seattle, who still has money on the table, and they give up Carson, that would be massive. There are teams out there where he could still land. And I'm just curious if you guys have any speculation on where you think he might go, or where you think they're looking.
Eric, I'll let you take that one first, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. I know one team that immediately came to mind when you were crafting your question was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. just given how ineffective, Peyton Barber was last year as well as Ronald Jones, he could be a good fit there. He's just not built to be a workhorse. I know the Cardinals, under Arians or Leftwich, who's a disciple of Arians, same mindset. Like to throw the football. They like to score a touchdown or get a first down. Really leverage the quarterback and the receivers. So I think if you even give a guy like Gordon, if that trade did take place, 14 to 16, opportunities a game, I think he could thrive. And that would also help his ego too, because he would be clearly the guy walking into that locker room too.
I would love to see him play in Tampa Bay, man. That would be exciting. This new Bruce Arians offense, the Jameis Winston's prime for a big year. Chris Godwin's going to break out. But if you put a serious running back in that backfield, that would make both Mike Evans, well, really all three of Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and O.J. Howard just even that much more dangerous. Gordon out of the backfield there would be nasty. I don't know if Bill O'Brien is done with the hold my beer moves in Houston, and I don't think it's necessarily out of the question to see them try and get Melvin Gordon to upgrade over Carlos Hyde and have Melvin Gordon, Duke Johnson as their backfield with Deshaun Watson. I think that would be exciting to see.
It would be exciting to see, but I don't see that happening just on the fact that he's been riding it out with Lamar Miller, and I am a huge Lamar Miller fan, but they've been running with mediocre run game for the last 3 years. They thought they were fine with Miller this year. Carlos Hyde, I think, is still serviceable. I think he had a great opportunity with San Fran, did what he could there. Houston could be a good landing spot for him, but Duke Johnson will be fine. I view them airing it out a lot this year.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Max, because of you look at the Texans' offensive line, which is unfortunate for Miller, because I'm a Miller guy too. Obviously before the injury, is that this would have been like the best offensive line he would have played with since arriving in Houston. So I know they've year in and year out ranked low in Pro Football Focus's offensive lineman grades. Their adjusted line yards and other metrics from like places like Football Outsiders. Didn't look good. So I'm like, you get a guy like Gordon there, I'm like, he could really thrive. Just considering what's.
I used to say last year when we would talk about Miller, as a fan sitting at home, yes, I probably paid more attention than the average football fan, but I knew when they were going to run before they did. You know what I mean? It was one of those. Yeah. O'Brien runs one of the most predictable offenses you've ever seen, and they don't have an offensive line that could support a predictable offense. So I feel really bad for Miller, and I hope next year he gets another shot at it, because I still believe that kid can do it.
Yeah.
He was definitely a favorite target of mine later, because he was a bona fide RB1 that you could get after the 6th round, and a lot of 10-mans maybe after the 5th round and 12-man. But that injury really shook up a lot of things. Duke Johnson turned into an RB1 for all of, 3 days? And then Carlos Hyde signs, and that brings both of those guys down a little bit as far as being able to project one or the other. Who do you think scores more fantasy points in the Houston backfield this year, starting with Max?
Well, it depends. Are you talking PPR or standard? Because I think, actually, in both, I think it's Duke Johnson. I think I really like him. I think he's very talented. If he can stay healthy, I don't see him. They're giving him the shot first. They're going to take the hot hand approach. I think Duke Johnson's going to be perfectly fine.
Eric, what do you think? Who scores more fantasy points in that backfield this year, Duke Johnson or Carlos Hyde?
Yeah, it's Duke Johnson for me as well. Just given his ability, as a runner and also as a receiver, out of the backfield. It's just that offense has, so many weapons. And so he's going to find himself in mismatches, and he's going to be able to take advantage of that. I just think Duke Johnson is more productive, just given a limited workload. So I just really feel like Carlos Hyde is like the disposable hero, I guess, kind of using a loose Metallica Master of Puppets reference. He's just there to kind of take contact and to take carries. But I think if you give Duke Johnson like 14 opportunities a game in that offense.
I kind of feel bad for Carlos Hyde. Sorry for cutting you off there. I feel like you said disposable hero, and I think that's really what he is. He's a running back that everyone knows is good enough to potentially be a starter, but will never get the position again, unless there's severe injuries in front of him. And I think Duke's good enough that I think he can handle it.
Well, I know definitely in any PPR format at all, I would definitely take Duke Johnson, and I agree with both of you. There's no way Carlos Hyde, outside of an injury, scores more fantasy points. I think Duke Johnson's going to thrive in this role. He's been waiting a long time to get the opportunity, and now he has it. I think he plans on making the most of it. And about making the most of it, now we're going to talk about making the most of your drafts. How about some sleepers, guys, that you really think have kind of flown under the radar even all the way up to this point? Eric, start with you. Who do you think is a guy that's really going to blow up this year that's fallen under the radar?
Yeah, it was so many good choices. I know one guy that immediately came to mind was Robbie Anderson. I know a lot of folks aren't really high on him. I know he had a down 2018 season, after being really productive, in 2017. I just think once you have Sam Darnold, with the weapons that the Jets have surrounded him with, Jamison Crowder, Le'Veon Bell, and you've got Anderson that's still there. I think he's in a really, really great situation to thrive, especially if Adam Gase follows through on what he's talked about with having him expand like his route tree. So I think he's going to be a little bit more consistent, so less boom or bust. And I just feel like he's going to have a really, really good season. And just looking like at his ADP where he's going, I think he's going to be in a position to outperform that. I got some other guys I can touch on too that are going much, much later, but he's just one guy that came to my mind.
Well, I absolutely love Robbie Anderson. He's a guy I've targeted everywhere, so I'm glad I'm not in any leagues with you, because then I'd have to be reaching for him. But even with that calf injury that's kind of been hampering him a little bit, I am absolutely in love with him. I've watched him since Temple, and I'm glad to see somebody from Temple doing so well in the NFL. And I think that with Sam Darnold being a little more used to game speed, I think he's ready to take off this year, and he should have over 1,000 yards, and I'm hoping to see him. I have him projected around 7 touchdowns. So if he can pull that stat line, I would be enthralled. Max, who do you have as a sleeper?
Sorry, I was just thinking about the Robbie Anderson thing, because the more I think about him, the more I think about Robbie Anderson, I think they have Jamison Crowder now. I love Crowder. He was great on the Redskins, and to me, he's going to be like Anderson's going to be a boomer bust guy, but I with his skill set, he's probably just going to boom. And I only have him in one league so far, and I'm going to regret that I only have him in one league, and I know it. That being said, the guy I'm targeting in the later rounds, not necessarily a sleeper, but someone people are definitely overlooking, is Dante Moncrief. Being the number 2 at Pittsburgh comes with a lot of targets. This is a former third-round pick. People expected him to be the next up-and-coming on the Colts. He's always underperformed, but I keep saying the skill set. He's another receiver that truly has the skill set that if he just stepped up, he could be so good. In playing next to Juju, it's like Juju's going to be double covered no matter what. They're going to have underneath looks for Connor. Moncrief can get open, and if he does, and if he really steps up to the plate this year, he's going to have a monster year, and I've been getting him in like the 11th round.
Mm-hmm. He definitely is their wide receiver 2 at the moment. James Washington had a standout preseason and looked very good, but even with all of that, the depth chart came out and it was Moncrief listed as number 2. So you definitely have to expect him to see a lot of targets, and he's not a guy that I've always had a lot of faith in, but he's definitely going to have the opportunity to put up some big numbers this year, and he is a big play guy. Eric, what do you think of Dante Moncrief out there?
No, I like Dante Moncrief. I know he's had some success, early in his NFL career, with the Colts. Now he finds himself with the Steelers, with Ben Roethlisberger, in that offense. They've got a high number of targets and air yards, up for grabs with Antonio Brown's departure. So I know a lot of folks out there are higher on James Washington. Just given the hype that he had, coming out of college, to the NFL. But I like the idea of Moncrief being a sleeper. Great situation. I know the Steelers, I believe, my memory serves me right, led the league in pass attempts last season. That trend is likely to continue. He can benefit from it.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of targets to go around with Antonio Brown gone, Le'Veon Bell gone. James Conner's more of a running back than Le'Veon Bell was. Le'Veon Bell was that Swiss Army knife that you could split out wide, and he ran a better route than most of the wide receivers in the NFL right now, which is pretty wild. I would have to say that the guy that I've been able to get late that I think could really blow up this year is Anthony Miller of the Bears. He got hurt late last year and kind of lost some targets towards the from weeks 11 on, but he really displayed good connection with Mitch Trubisky early in the year, and I think you're going to see him kind of usurp more targets from Allen Robinson than a lot of people are saying right now. I actually expect Anthony Miller to take over the wide receiver 1 position sooner than later. Probably not week 1, but possibly by the end of this season, you'll see Anthony Miller getting the predominant of the looks from Mitch Trubisky. What do you guys think of Anthony Miller?
I think Allen. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Miller's going to be fine, but overtake Robinson, I just don't see it happening. I feel like people forget that, like, when he was on the Jaguars with Blake Bortles as his quarterback, yeah, the guy could throw a million miles, but it'd be 45 feet into the stands. Allen Robinson was considered like a second-round pick. He's a fantastic receiver, and I think if you're targeting anyone on the Bears, it's Robinson. Yes, targets are going to need to be spelled somewhere else, but I don't see Miller as that much of a boom potential. I see Robinson as the guy on the Bears who you can get in the 5th, 6th round and quite possibly get second-round value out of.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
you can get Anthony Miller in the 15th, 16th, 17th round, so having both of them just in case wouldn't be a bad thing. What if Monsieur Anthony Miller gets hurt? Nope.
Yeah, if he gets hurt.
Allen Robinson gets hurt.
This is a flyer pick, which is fine. 15th round's fine, but I wouldn't draft him thinking like, oh, I got my secret weapon right here. Because, like, there are guys that, like, later in the draft, which I'm sure Moody has some, I can think of people that have I think, a better path to success than him. I'd have to see it. I'd have to see it more.
No, I really do stand by Anthony Miller, but I do understand the skepticism. Eric, what do you have to say, brother?
Yeah. I was like, chomping at the bits. I was like, I agree with Max, because you look at Allen Robinson. I know he played 13 games, last season. He commanded a 22% target share. Played 91.2% of the offensive snaps, which was solid. Really, the opportunity for him was with Mitch Trubisky. He ranked like 25th in true passer rating, which he ended up having like a 84.3, rating. What I like about that metric, it factors out like unpressured, throwaways and drop passes. Also, Trubisky struggled on deep pass attempts too. He only had a completion percentage around, 29.6%. Now, one thing with the offseason, that they're going to have together, that they've had together, in Nagy's offense, is that they can kind of get more on the same, like, wavelength, which I thought was what was really impressive with Robinson, though, is that he still finished last season, with the true catch rate of 86%, which was impressive. He's only 26 years old. He's still in his prime. He already has like a monster season on his resume, as Max mentioned, with Blake Bortles. Where he that was back in 2015, I believe. He had around like 1,400 receiving yards, 14 touchdowns. I'm like, he can come close to those numbers with Trubisky this year. I do believe they'll end up passing the ball more. So Robinson's a guy that I would target, as a potential, wide receiver 1, at his 5th, 6th, 7th round ADP. He's just off the radar for people because they are kind of dealing with recency bias, thinking about, what he did last year.
Well, I guess I will stand on this hill by myself then, and I will die on this hill this year, apparently. I haven't taken him earlier than the 14th round, so I don't feel terrible. It's not like I'm wasting early picks on him, but I guess that's my hot take. So Eric, what other sleepers do you have to save me from this Anthony Miller hill? Let me walk on down to chat about another one with you here.
All right, well, I guess we'll stay with wide receivers. We can always transition to other positions or weave them in. But Michael Gallup is one. I love his average draft position where he's going. He continues to fly underneath the radar. But, that's expected, just considering how much attention, Amari Cooper is getting. I believe, his performance against the Rams, in the playoffs, are kind of giving us a glimpse of what the future looks like. I know he had 9 targets in that game, 6 receptions, 119 receiving yards. And I know he's had some time, in his first NFL offseason to adjust, to the NFL game. But you look at his production in the second half of last season, it's the exact opposite, of the first. And I know when looking at other advanced metrics, like college dominator rating with player profiler, I'm he, given the percentile, that he scored in for that metric, I'm he has, number one receiver potential. I'm he gained easy separation as a rookie. He averaged, 7.5 yards a target last year, which is very respectable. I'm you're looking at a guy that's available that late in drafts who has a potential to see, 100 or more targets. So he's a solid wide receiver 3. He's got wide receiver 2 upside. So I know that's a guy that I've been targeting heavily in all the leagues I've been in.
I absolutely love him as well, and I think he actually could have some big weeks if Amari Cooper misses any time with this plantar fasciitis, which is definitely a recurring injury that's not going to go away. So Michael Gallup could be sneaky good at his current ADP.
I have no issues with him in general. I don't like Dak Prescott. It's not a personal thing. I don't think he throws a pretty ball. I need to see how it works out this year. I know there's a lot of hype around Dak. He's a future of the Cowboys. I think Amari Cooper's going to see a lot of the work. I don't know if Dak is good enough to make 2 viable receivers, to be completely honest. I view him as a wide receiver 3, and I'd be happy if he puts up wide receiver 3 numbers. I kind of personally think his ADP is perfect, not because of him, because of the quarterback.
No, absolutely. Dak Prescott hasn't exactly shown that he's been the model of consistency throughout a season. And he looked a lot better with Amari Cooper, and I think Amari Cooper is going to demand top coverage, which leaves Michael Gallup to feast on some lower-end DBs. So that could work out very well for him. And I really like that pick. And I have enough faith in Dak for his current ADP. But like you said, Max, I don't know that I would reach too much further for Michael Gallup than where he currently is. How far would you reach to take him, Eric?
Ooh, that's a really intriguing question. What I was thinking, I would take him as early as the 9th, 10th round. I'm trying to think about where his ADP is at. I know a lot of things are in flux, as we're kind of going towards the tail end of draft season.
Oh, this is
God's kind of help me out. Where's he at right now?
So the app has it listed as he's the 117th rank player, and he has an ADP of 10.05. So I'd be comfortable taking him in the 10th round. I'd probably, if I needed a little depth as far as the 9th, but I don't know that I'd take him any earlier than that.
I didn't click on the link. I was just reading what was below the link. It gives you a quick little excerpt. It said 14.1. You click on the link, current ADP, 10.4. So that's on me. Sorry, fantasy football calculator.
We'll blame it on technology. Technology's been a thorn in our side tonight. Max, who's your next sleeper, man?
All right, my next sleeper, again, not much of a sleeper, but these are guys that I think people should really target because they are being overlooked. And like you said, in industry leagues, it's kind of different, even though I am in a few non-industry leagues where I did get to scoop them. Emmanuel Sanders, coming back, looking good in practice. if you're in a PPR league, believe he's going to get targeted, and a lot. He isn't a receiver who really gets hurt that much, but in PPR he always excels. And right now his ADP is around 8. And with a guy, and especially in a PPR league, like I said, potentially a wide receiver 2 on your hands, low end obviously, but still, potential wide receiver 2, I think 8th round's a steal.
Absolutely. I actually think that Emmanuel Sanders could have some wide receiver 1 weeks. He's definitely going to have a lot of wide receiver 2 weeks. Joe Flacco is a good deep ball thrower, and they're playing in Denver, and the air is real thin, and Emmanuel Sanders is real fast. Not to mention a freak of nature. He tore his Achilles last year, and he's running full speed, and he looks pretty good doing it. Eric, what do you think about Emmanuel Sanders this year?
Yeah, he's a guy that I'm fading. I just still have some concerns over the Achilles injury. I've watched the tape. I've seen him run routes. The practice footage. All that kind of stuff. But I'm just not buying into him being 100% healthy. So I would say the one receiver out of that group of players that I'm targeting more is Courtland Sutton. I think he's a really good fit for Joe Flacco. Like you were talking about his arm strength and the thin air of Denver. That's a guy that I would rather have just in case Emmanuel Sanders does have a setback and he's out, X amount of weeks.
And Courtland Sutton is going a full 3 rounds later, and his ADP right now, he's at 1105. And Emmanuel Sanders is up to 803, which is a little further. I guess I didn't expect him to have risen that far, but I guess people started to catch on. You aren't the only person that thought that, Max.
Well, I'm not.
Well played, sir.
I said round 8 because I just looked at it. Round 8 I think is honestly perfect. But in the industry leagues, like I said, I reached for him. I got him around 6 because in a few leagues I'm in, it's extremely wide receiver heavy. So by round 6, there's slim pickings. And Emmanuel Sanders is one of those receivers that, in my eyes, in PPR, is going to be consistent for you, and consistency is key to winning.
I'll interject and add something else too. So
sure,
looking at age is really important of these players, especially when it comes from recovering from injuries or whatnot. Like you look at Emmanuel Sanders, so that's a guy. His birthday was back in March. He's 32 years old. I'm like, if you go all the way back to the year 2000, and you look at wide receiver seasons, fantasy seasons, like in PPR where they've scored, 230 or more fantasy points. I'm like, if you look back over that time frame, it's only been 11 wide receivers that have had that type of production, at 32 years old. And so obviously age is important when you're looking at career arcs, production, who to target, and that sort of thing. I just don't see him being like an anomaly to buck that trend.
The only counter I have to that is, how long ago did he rupture his Achilles? I mean, this is obscenely fast that he's back to full speed and playing in NFL action. I mean, the guy is legitimately a freak of nature. That's the only reason I think maybe he might have a little longer than most wide receivers. You look at Larry Fitzgerald out there in Arizona. I would assume this is last year, but like Tom Brady, he keeps going.
Well, that's the thing too with Sanders is he's not one of these like receivers. Like if Golden Tate was 32 coming off this injury, I wouldn't put him in. I wouldn't be as willing to trust. You know what I mean? Emmanuel Sanders has been great his whole career. Even when he's bad, he's still better than most of the receivers in the NFL. And 32, I think 32, 33 are probably the last 2 years in either a running back or wide receiver's age where you can truly still be in the quote-unquote prime, I think. So with today's technology, as far as medicine goes, his unbelievable athleticism and work ethic, I trust him. But I can see why people won't. I totally get it.
Eric, any rebuttal?
Yeah, I was just kind of taking it all in. I would say the one thing I did think about, where you mentioned about with Sanders, I know he had the Achilles. It's going to help me out here. I may get this wrong, but I know he had like a second surgery too. I thought it may have been on his ankle. I may need to look that up. And so you got a guy that's coming off of two different surgeries. For where he could be an outlier, I could still take that into account. It's just when you look at like the data going back many seasons, it's just not many players that can still just have that production that he's had in the past. The situation's not ideal too with having Joe Flacco there either, but I'm still going to stand by my argument.
No, I totally understand. The uncertainty from Joe Flacco kind of makes those things real hard to kind of nail down. You would expect him to do well. He's a drop back passer with Vic Fangio. That's going to be an old school offense. Should be catering right to him. And he's a big guy, which is what Elway wants. Nice big guy that can throw a nice deep ball. And I will say that Joe Flacco throws one of the prettiest deep balls that I've ever seen.
That's what
he's just so big. Yeah, I mean, it's just I'm a huge Ravens fan. Grew up outside of Baltimore, so I got to watch Flacco as he came up, and the best thing about him was that 2012 playoff push, and talk about timing. And Nick Foles just did the same thing to the Jaguars that he did to the Ravens. Huge payday after.
That's how you do it. Now, I just looked up Sanders' second surgery. It's called a thigh-trope surgery on his right ankle. So I guess he was having pain in his right ankle, and he was getting constantly massaged, iced, treated for pain. And he said he thinks it's actually what led to his ACL tearing. But even with that, he still hauled in 71 catches, 868 yards, 4 touchdowns with that ankle pain. And that was in 2018. Then he tore his ACL. Now, this surgery, I feel like it's more preventative than necessary, if that makes sense. Because he essentially reinforced he got a metal rod put into his leg to reinforce his tibia and fibia to give the ankle more strength because it felt weak. And he said it was worse than the Achilles surgery. He had to even crawl up the stairs because of it, but now he's back to full strength and he feels better than ever.
That's so bizarre.
That's weird.
The worst part out of that was not the Achilles injury. Something about that is strange.
Well, they put a metal rod in your leg, they have to drill into your bone. Yeah, rough stuff.
Fun times.
I still believe in him.
All right, so there's a couple of receivers going around him, and I'm going to ask you guys who you would rather have. So, and I'll tell you later if they're before or after him in ADP. Would you rather have Will Fuller or Emmanuel Sanders? Max?
Sanders.
Eric?
I'd rather have Will Fuller.
All right. Christian Kirk or Emmanuel Sanders, and we'll start with Eric.
Christian Kirk. Air raid, baby.
Sanders.
Max? All right. Curtis Samuel or Emmanuel Sanders? Max?
That is a tough one for me. Can I flip a coin?
That's
I'm still going to have to go with Emmanuel Sanders. I just think the QB situation is better right now.
Whoa.
I don't like Cam Newton. He hasn't been like that great of a quarterback. At least not fantasy-wise.
Not throwing.
Not for your receivers.
Now, how about you, Eric? Who would you take?
Yeah, that was a little bit of a tougher one for me. I was actually leaning a little bit more towards Sanders on that one, just to kind of take on a little bit more risk. Because the thing with Samuels is that I was very high on Samuels kind of going into the season, but his ADP has just continued to rise. And I'd rather just have like DJ Moore as opposed to Samuels, at least where he's being drafted right now.
So DJ Moore is the 606, and Curtis Samuel is the 804. So he's one behind Emmanuel Sanders. Will Fuller is 708, and Christian Kirk is the 806. Now, there's definitely some wide receiver rooms that we have very little clarity on right now, maybe a little bit more so with depth charts being released. But what, Max, do you think is going to be, who do you think is going to be a better fantasy producer this year? Kenny Golladay or Marvin Jones?
Oh God, it's like I want to say Marvin Jones, but I can't trust him. I'd have to say Golladay. I'd be dumb not to. So yeah, I'm going to say Golladay, just because Jones, he's old and he can get hurt, and I actually like Detroit's other options this year, so I'm going to go with Golladay.
All right, how about you, Eric?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Kenny Golladay as well. I just know, looking back at last year, I know he had an opportunity, once they kind of move, Golden Tate, to Philly. I know the guy's been all over the place. So when they traded him to Philly, so I know going into this year, I know they've got a new offensive coordinator, Darrell Bevel. I think he's going to bring like a much needed urgency, I would say, to the Lions offense. Because one thing I noticed about the Lions, like of last year, is that they had one of the slowest paces last season, offensively. So Galladay's entering his age 25 season. He's in the perfect situation to thrive. And he'll see, obviously, some additional targets since he'll be like the guy, for the entire season. So Golladay for me.
So Kenny Galladay's current ADP is the 505, and Marvin Jones is the 811. So would you, since it's kind of being viewed as 1A and 1B, Golladay getting more than Marvin Jones, would you still want to take Kenny Golladay at his current ADP, or would you take Marvin Jones at his current ADP?
I still rather take Golladay. I
think he's a safer pick.
Yeah, and he's at that age for where he could take that, that next step and truly have a breakout season. And just
now, can I ask you a question?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Are you saying more? Oh, I was going to say their tight end, TJ Hawkinson. I can't say the last name.
Hawkinson.
I'll learn how to speak someday. But he looks good. He's got a chemistry brewing with Stafford. I'm actually looking at him like, if you're going to do another sleeper, I was going to say this is a weird one, but a last round tight end flyer, because like if you grab Hunter Henry early or you grab someone early, I think he actually might ruin the wide receiving core for Detroit. Golladay, I still think, is a better pick, but I think guy who's going to take from Marvin Jones the most is going to be their new tight end there. And I was just wondering, like, what you guys might have thought of it.
Well, I definitely like T.J. Hawkinson as a flyer, last skill position pick in a draft. I would have no issue with that. The one problem I have is that rookie tight ends have the hardest time for any skill position producing. I think that a good year for T.J. Hawkinson is going to be 35 to 40 receptions for 600 yards.
Yeah, but if I can counter that, you're not wrong in the fact that it's hard for rookie tight ends, but if you look at the rookie tight ends that we kind of are household names now, or the tight ends who are household names now, they were kind of studs when they were rookies. Hunter Henry, Reed, Gronk. Like, they were studs when they came out, and Matt Stafford tried to make Ebron a stud. Tried. Threw that man the ball. He loves his tight ends. He's constantly trying to feed his tight ends. Matt Stafford hasn't had a good tight end, or at least one who played well until he got traded to a different team. So I think this could be the guy. Stafford's always under pressure. The run game is never that great. We're hoping for something different this year, but it never really is, and he likes the check down to the tight end. So that's where my mindset's at, when it's like, yo, if I can throw a flyer at this guy, I think there's actual potential there for a super sleeper at a position where you're happy if you get 5 points a week out of him.
I certainly, like I said, I like him as a flyer. Eric, what do you think? What do you think that Baby Gronk, T.J. Hawkinson can produce enough to displace targets from the wide receiving core in Detroit?
Yeah, I don't think that he'll be able to. I just know Darrell Bevel, likes to run a lot of two tight end sets. So I think he'll see some opportunities, but also see it really helping the running game too. So I just believe they're going to use him more like as a blocker, to help with Kerryon Johnson, in the running game. I just like him as a I guess as a prospect, he's got all the intangibles. He's really a complete tight end. I just think we're a couple of years out before we really see that come to fruition.
That's kind of where I'm at as well. But Max, I think it's a brilliant idea to take him as a flyer. I think there is certainly the upside. I just wouldn't expect much more than rookie tight end output. But like you said, an excellent flyer. So moving on to another group of receivers, and this one has been really kind of muddy for a while now. And they have a defined wide receiver one in Alshon Jeffrey. But recently I've kind of been hearing some trade rumors. I don't know how much merit they actually hold. But starting with you, Eric, who would you like to have if you have to have an Eagles wide receiver? For these guys that are Eagles fans and they want to be able to take a smart choice in the draft but still have an Eagle on their team, who would you take?
Yeah, I would take Alshon Jeffrey. I know some Eagles fans may feel a little bit sentimental, now that Deshaun Jackson is quote-unquote returning home. But one thing with Jeffrey, if you have the right expectations in drafting him, I think that helps, because he's the type of possession receiver for where he's obviously going to dominate, the shorter routes, the intermediate routes. But he was just ridiculously effective last season, just considering the target volume that he did receive. So I think he could repeat that, in 2019 and be, a nice value. He's just not the type of player that I'm going to reach for, but if he's there in a draft when I'm on the clock around his ADP, I never hesitate to not get him, I guess the best way to put it.
Certainly, and his ADP is actually pretty low for a wide receiver one. He's at 6'12". How about you, Max? What Eagles wide receiver would you take?
So I've been a huge fan of Alshon Jeffrey Bear days. I love the dude. His hands were everything to me because if the ball's near him, he almost never drops it. I'm not sure his catch completion percentage, but I'm sure it's crazy high. 6th round, I don't know if I take him because 6th round is kind of where wide receivers start getting murky for me. Because I think for a while Landry was 6th round, and with the amount of weapons they have, I wasn't even looking at him. The wide receiver I'd want there would be Nelson Aguilar, and that's just because they like him a lot there. He has great chemistry with Wentz. We expect a lot from him. He did step up last year, and I don't expect him to really fall back this year. I expect a slow start, and he'll pick it back up. And I think for his current ADP, which I will tell you in just 1 second.
Yeah, I'm looking for it, and I can't even find him.
Yeah, I know I got him on the waiver wire in 2 leagues.
Yeah, he's definitely the forgotten Eagle.
Yeah, he falls off, but it's like there's a reason they kept him around when they cut Matthews. You know what I mean? The organization likes him. I think he meshes well with Wentz. And for paying literally nothing for him, I would just like to have him on my team as the potential PPR stud that we kind of all hoped he was going to be.
He certainly had a good year. The year they won the Super Bowl really broke out, and I expected him to kind of continue that trend up last year. And I don't know. God, I don't remember hearing his name last year.
Well, last year he had 64. He wasn't a surefire hand. 64 receptions on 97 targets. I love the 97 targets. He should have done better. 730 on the yards, only 4 touchdowns. I do expect him to have a bounce back here. Bringing Deshaun in, I don't even know why he's there.
Because he's fast. He's real fast.
Yeah,
and the reason they brought in Deshaun Jackson, because they didn't have anyone on that out of that group of receivers that could really threaten defenses vertically. I know they had the Mike Wallace experiment. That didn't really pan out because he ended up getting hurt. And then they had Torrey Smith from the year before. And so I get why they brought Jackson in. I just think the presence of Jackson will help Alshon Jeffrey even more, because that's really going to allow him to thrive in that short to intermediate part of the field.
But if we put Algo, so if you have you would have Jeffrey as a slot, not as the number 2. But I think if you have Deshaun going deep, that's pulling safeties back. You have Alshon, you need a double cover. He is the most talented there. That leaves opportunities for Aguilar. And like I said, he's a free pick right now. He doesn't even have an ADP. He's not being drafted. You can get him on the wire. That's the kind of value I want.
Yeah, he's a nice, sneaky wide receiver depth piece right now. And like Max said, he's free. And you can't beat free. If you need depth before week 1, Nelson Aguilar is a sneaky stash.
Yeah, the one concern with Aguilar, though, is just with, like a target share. And like you've got Jeffrey that's there, you got Jackson. We haven't even talked about Zach Ertz. I know with having Golden Tate, obviously, with the Giants now, that helps. But it's just going to be tough for him to see opportunities. And then you also have Dallas Goedert there as well. I know the Eagles ran. I'm assuming this trend will repeat itself this year. They ran, the highest percentage of 2 tight end sets last year. So they just have a lot of weapons, and including Whiteside too.
Yeah, they have a lot of weapons. But that being said, Aguilar to me, and this is 10,000 mile look, and I know it's going to sound crazy. I think Aguilar is the second best receiver on that team. That being said, I think he'll probably see about 5 to 6 targets a game. If he catches 3 for 40 yards, that's 7 points. That's a fine flex for a PPR. That's okay flex. And I do expect his production to go up. I think the addition of Deshaun puts a fire under his butt. He's very talented. The Eagles know he's talented. Like I said, Jordan Matthews had an unbelievable season, and then they got rid of him and kept Aguilar, and no one knew why. Well, then Aguilar kind of showed it. I expect him to show it again. And that's why for free is for me.
There's definitely some issues with target share there. I can't disagree with that at one bit, but free is free, and I like free.
I'm just trying to bring me down.
Man, keeping you down, man. Free stuff. Free America.
I think he'll be good for about 4 targets a game.
Yeah, totally. If he's super efficient, he could be a wide receiver too. Now moving on to another group of wide receivers that's just super cloudy right now. Again, you're forced to take somebody. Who are you choosing? Buffalo Bills, Max. Who do you got?
Do I have to?
Unfortunately, yes. The world will end if you do not pick a Bills receiver.
I gotta check the Bills roster to make sure who I'm thinking of is still even there, because I know he got arrested last year, and I don't look at the Bills much, to be completely honest with you guys.
I've got
you go first.
Sure, Eric, what do you got?
Gather your thoughts. I'll jump in. One guy that from the Bills that I'm very high on that is really going under the radar is Cole Beasley.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So Cole Beasley would be my guy, because he's the best receiving option that they have that can help out like underneath. And I'm like, with Cole Beasley's catch rate, being as high as it is, I'm like, if the ball's thrown his way, I'm like, he's going to catch it. And he's also really good at creating space and separating from defenders. And with Josh Allen, he needs, all the help that he can get. But I think it's going to help Josh Allen even be more consistent as a quarterback, because I know his completion percentage as a QB, was very low. He was very boom or bust because everyone knows him for his arm strength, pushing the ball down the field. And he was very successful at that when you look at air yards and other metrics. But having Beasley underneath, I think he's in a position to have a monster season, and they paid him too, so he is going to get a high target share.
And he is right now on the calculator. His ADP is 14-2. So you can grab him late in the draft. And I actually read an article from a beat reporter saying that he expects Cole Beasley to have a huge rebound year. He's got great rapport, and he's that safety valve for Josh Allen, that Jamison Crowder-esque underneath quick guy, play in the slot, and make some big plays and move the chains. Max, have you decided on what bill you would like to take before the world ends, sir?
World ends, gun to my head. Zay Jones. Gun to my head. That's it. I don't want any of them. to be honest. If you had to, I'm saying Zay Jones because I forgot Cole Beasley was even there. Beasley's a little PPR stud, and I feel like his veteran mindset is really going to help the young quarterback, especially second year in the league. He'll be much better. If I can't pick Beasley because he's already taken, I'm taking Zay Jones. I think he's talented, and if he can keep his head straight and not get arrested and do crazy stuff, the skill set's there. He showed flashes of it, and I think potentially he could be set to break out.
I love Zay Jones, and I loved him all through the offseason, and I took him as my super awesome late round, my bench is better than your bench guy, and I felt great about it until he just dropped off the face of the earth, essentially, and didn't really – I guess there was an injury in camp. Something happened. He spent time not working with the team, and – everybody just seems to be about the same right now in Buffalo. If I had a gun to my head, I'm taking Zay Jones myself because I think he had good rapport last year with Josh Allen. I think he's kind of their possession receiver. But there's merit in John Brown as a late-round flyer. He's a speedster with one of the best arms in the NFL, so you can't really discount if Josh Allen can throw it somewhere in the zip code of John Brown. He could have some big games. What do you think about do you think John Brown could have a kind of a rebound season after he fell off once Lamar took over in Baltimore, Eric?
Yeah, I believe John Brown can, and I know his average draft position has definitely shot up, in the month of August. So, he's still in his physical prime, and I know he's paired with the right QB in Josh Allen. I know he led all quarterbacks in pass attempts of 20 yards or more last year. I know he's had an off season, to work with Allen, really understand Brian DeBall's offense. And I think what's really good too is that they haven't had really many coaching changes or front office changes. So assuming that the scheme will be the same, but also with the off season moves that were made, bringing in Beasley, John Brown. Really implies that they want to throw the ball more, this year. And so, Brown's a great pick. I like him. I just get, in some leagues, he's just going, I would say, ahead of where I would like to draft him. That's why I've been kind of gravitating towards Beasley and some of the other options.
Absolutely. Cole Beasley is the 14-2, and John Brown is the 12-6 right now on the calculator. Zay Jones is not listed, so apparently he's free.
Team free shit.
And
Team free shit right there.
Yes. Yeah, all about the free. So we've done a lot of kind of trying to clear up some foggy wide receiver positions. Are there any other position groups that you guys think deserve a little bit of attention here to help clarify things for the listeners before week one gets started? I mean, right now we're recording this, and it is 48 hours from about the end of the first NFL game. So is there – yeah, I am freaking ready, man. This is go time. Eric, is there any other position groups that you think deserve a little attention here?
Yes. Well, let's look at running backs. It's a couple of names late in drafts where I believe they're really undervalued, and it's some uncertainty with how those backfields will end up. I think Dion Lewis is one such player. I know everyone's really high on Derrick Henry, for what he ended up doing the latter part of last season. He was like a league winner, for players, fantasy players that still had him. But just with Lewis's, contract suggests that he is going to continue to get opportunities, in this year. And he did see opportunities last year, because if you look at Lewis, he averaged, 15.4 opportunities per game during the first 13 weeks of the season. He was the guy. But then they kind of transitioned more to Derrick Henry to close out the season. So, he's also has a skill set as a receiver, and that's a skill set that Derrick Henry has not demonstrated at the NFL level. So Lewis is a guy that I'm very open to getting in PPR formats as my, RB4, RB5. He's got a lot of upside. So that's one such player. I'll kind of swing back to the Buccaneers. I know Peyton Barber. I think the biggest asset that Peyton Barber brings to the table is his opportunity share. and he dominated the opportunities at the running back position last year for the Buccaneers. That trend will still, continue. He's just not the type of running back that can do, I guess, that can transcend like offensive line play. So just depending on how the offensive line in Tampa Bay performs this upcoming season will dictate what production that he has. But I'm like, he's essentially free in drafts, and you're able to get a lot of volume. Not a guy that you're really looking to deploy in lineups, but he's still a guy that's really good to have. Looking at tight end, I know it's two guys that are really undervalued and afterthoughts in drafts. The first such player is Kyle Rudolph. He's a guy that I really like. Gary Kubiak, was brought on by the Vikings to be their assistant head coach and their offensive advisor, and he's got a really, really good track record of using his tight ends. And the personnel moves that were made, to re-sign Rudolph, they drafted Irv Smith. It makes so much more sense when you look at it through the lens that Kubiak brings to the table. Because I know he in his offenses, everyone knows him for the zone blocking scheme and Dalvin Cook, etc. Those things will happen, but I know they're going to run a lot of two tight end sets and have Irv Smith and Kyle Rudolph out there running routes. So he's a guy that I think that can bounce back this year. I'll say another tight end that's really undervalued is Trey Burton. It's just surprising that he had the fantasy finish that he did. When you look at the data, you're just like, wait, did he really finish? As a top 8 tight end? But I think he's a guy that's in a really good situation in Matt Nagy's offense, especially if they end up passing the ball, more, for this year. And I know he got banged up at the end of the season, but he's been flying underneath the radar. But those are some players that immediately came to mind, at least at running back and tight end. So I got some other ones that I could put out there, but just want to pass the baton back to the two of you.
Well, that's pretty much everybody that I'd like to cover. The tight ends with, I love Kyle Rudolph, but I have to say Trey Burton kind of burned me last year. I really bought into the hype, and I'm suffering from a little bit of recency bias, and I have a 0% market share of Trey Burton this year. And not that I think he's going to do bad, not that I hope that he's going to do bad. He just burned me last year, and it hurt. It hurt me deep. Max, any closers, buddy?
Really quick. So, on the running back thing, the guy who keeps coming to mind for me is Latavius Murray. But he's a round 6 pick, which I think is perfectly fair for him. And so, that was the rough thing for me, because as far as running backs go, everything Eric listed, I agree with. Everything's a mess. Everything else is a mess. It's just sad. But if you want to talk tight ends for a second, Delaney Walker, I think his ADP currently is round 9. I think that's fantastic. He's coming back from an injury. He's going to slide right back in with Marcus Mariota. He's a top 5 tight end every single year, and I feel like this season no one's really talked about him. He's just so consistent for the Titans. He essentially is their number 1 receiving option. But at round 9, I'd take him there. I don't think that's too crazy of a reach for a tight end if you're someone like me who does wait to pick tight ends. And a little later is Jimmy Graham, whose current ADP is round 14. I think round 14 for Jimmy Graham on Green Bay, I just think it's fantastic. I think that draft value right there with Jimmy Graham's metrics, Aaron Rodgers coming back, we know Rodgers likes his tight ends. I think that's crazy good value, and he could be a tight end 1. He could be a low-end wide receiver 2 for you.
And I think the Packers placed Jay Sternberger, their rookie tight end, on injured reserve. So Jimmy Graham will be seeing the first-team reps unchallenged. He will be getting his chance to gel a little bit more with Aaron Rodgers. I was really surprised his output last year wasn't a little better. And him, like Trey Burton, I think a lot of people might see some recency bias. So I think it's good that you guys brought them up to let people know that last year is not this year, and that's important to remember. Each year is a new year. You can follow the trends, and analytics are fantastic, but sometimes people are outliers to the trend. And hopefully we can help you get set up for your first week here coming up, so I know I'm excited. And we're going to get ready to wrap it up here. It has been fantastic to have you, Eric. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, and if you have any big projects coming up, you can let us know about those as well.
No, sounds good. Yeah, I just want to thank the two of you for inviting me on. It has been a really good show, really good conversation, good dialogue, rapport between us. And so I think the first place you can find me would be on Twitter. My Twitter name is Eric N. Moody, so that's ERIC, N as in Nicholas, MOODY. And so you can find my content this year at the Athletic Fantasy and also at Fantasy Data. It's going to be a very busy NFL season. I've got 4 columns that I'm writing per week. The first of which is published right now. It's a Stardom and Situm. That's over at Fantasy Data. So I go into detail in quarterback position, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. For Wednesdays this season, Outside the Box is another column that I'm writing for The Athletic. It's just going to focus on a lot of advanced metrics and other statistics, and just kind of look at it through like a different lens, that other fantasy analysts are not. And then it'll be an advanced metrics article on Thursday that'll get published at Fantasy Data, and then a bold predictions piece, which will be also at Fantasy Data on Friday. So we'll be a busy man this NFL season, but I'm happy to help people, win their leagues, give advice. I just always try to be as available as I can. So that's what I got going on. I'm going to get the coffee pot going now.
Yeah, it's time to brew some coffee. You're going to be a busy man.
Oh, yeah.
Damn, Eric. And Max, how about where do we find you, brother man?
All right, you guys can find me at SleeperBot at MaxSW. I am still Twitterless, and I refuse to use it. I would know I'll cave eventually, and I'll get in there. I'll be on the mail sack here and there. I'll be on the Blitz here and there, filling in shows. I will say, Eric, it's fantastic to have you on. We did have a great conversation. I'd love to talk to you again, because the last interview, or the quote-unquote interview, or outside of the Sleeper Wire Network's family conversation I had was with Marcus Grant, and I don't think we agreed on a single thing. And it was fantastic.
No, hey, I'd love to keep the dialogue going as well. Yeah, it really has been a blast, gents.
Yeah, Eric, I can't thank you enough, man. This has been fantastic. Guys, you can find me on Twitter at Esorbor1. That's ESORBOR1. That's my name backwards. I am Rob Rose. You can find me on Sleeper app at Esorbor. Playing this year, I think I'm in 78 leagues. I pissed a few people off when I left a couple, so I'm one of those numbers guys, dude. Man. I love it, and I look forward to these analytics coming up.
I did 15 leagues one time. One time I agreed to 15 because I was like, the fans want it. It was one of the most stressful years I've ever had. And you're in 75? Oh my God.
I don't do things. I play fantasy
Fair
football.
Enough.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yep, that and throw raves. So look forward to that as well, guys. Eric, it's been great to have you. Max, fantastic, man. And hopefully you guys are as stoked for the season as we are. And we will see you next time.
Peace.